I was born in a little place called Webb, just outside of Swift Current. Usually in the military, you do as you're told, but I was fortunate. They asked me, I debated that morning when I was going to join up whether to become a paratrooper, and I thought, well, jumping out of a plane, I'm not sure that's my thing. So I applied, and I got my job as tank driver. I was around 21, I guess. Yeah, I was born in 28, and I joined the military in 51. And we spent the summer in Wainwright training on the tanks. It was good training for us there, because of course we had to get used to the tanks, and I had driven a car, but I certainly hadn't driven a tank, so it took me a little while to get used to that. But way out there, it was always a lot of fun, really. That was a good time, and we'd race back to camp at night to see who could get there first with their tank. And the tanks we used at that time had 5 people. You had 2 drivers, a driver and a co-driver, and then you have a wireless operator, and you have a gunner, and you have the crew commander. I went over as a driver and trained as a driver in Wainwright, and then after a short time in Korea, I was a crew commander, then in charge of a tank. Yeah. We went over with, well, we were a squadron with about 20, well, 4 tanks to a squadron, but then we had a dozer tank and a recovery tank and the likes of that. We were well into North Korea, maybe, I'm maybe not right on this distance, but about 15 miles, because the line didn't follow the 38th parallel. It's a jagged line. So we were on 355, was one of the highest hills there, and we as Canadians usually held that hill, but there would be attacks on it. Yes, it was quite a bit of, I'd call it patrols. We would send out patrols into the enemy lines to try to find out things at night, and they would also send patrols in. And then on one hill, they sent a lot of people in, and they took over the hill, and well, that was bad that night. That was May the 3rd, and 53, yeah, we lost 25 Canadians that night. But that was a big patrol that came in on us. But then we had to call on the artillery. We were ordered to get in our tanks, and infantry ordered underground, and our own artillery cleared the hill. They just poured it on us. I never want to live through that again. It's pretty amazing. You're very close to them. They patrol the line at night, but during the day we never saw the infantry because our tank attracted fire. The enemy would shell us. They never used armor piercing, so they couldn't pierce our tanks, but they used a lot of what we called high explosive, and they would shell us sometimes for 4 or 5 hours during the day, but the infantry would disappear because our tank drew the fire.
I see. But
at night they were right there beside us, because the front of our tank was the rear side of the trench. Armor piercing was never fired at us, so our tank stayed there hour after hour, day after day. We were sandbagged in. We were basically sandbagged in there because you don't want them to get at your tracks. A tank is no good if you blow one track off.
Yeah.
You always have one good guy in your tank that's kind of comical. And I always remember us being shelled this one day, and they were coming in, and they were just to the left of us a little bit. And Barney was quite a character. He opened the hatch and he says, 5 yards to the right. Well, I've never seen his expression change so much. The next 5 rounds landed right on our tank, right on top of his hatch. And I've never seen Barney look so surprised when those 5 rounds landed. But that's the sort of I shouldn't call it the comical side of war, but that's what you learn to live with.
So did you guys sleep in the tank as well at night? Or?
We usually slept behind. We had little bunkers dug in beside the tank or behind. When we first got there, they were not in the ground too far, and sandbags on top, and you just crawled into this hole. But the problem was they were sending in delayed action rounds, and the round would pierce that dirt and land right where you were sleeping and then explode. My mother wrote once a week, usually, and I wrote, and yes, when you ask about that, it's kind of interesting, because we were digging one of these deep holes to make a bunker, and I sat down to write to my mother, And as I ducked my head to say, "Dear Mum," the shrapnel went by and took some of my hair into the bank beside me, but it didn't hit me. Miller was our gunner. He was walking by the tank one day, and you can understand we had a lot of ammunition stored around our tanks. And we had a 50 caliber machine gun for use at night. And there was a lot of that 50 caliber ammunition stored beside our tank. And Miller, who was our gunner, happened to be walking when a round came in and hit that ammunition right there. And he had 14 pieces of shrapnel in him. And our officers and sergeants were gone for the day. So I was in charge then as corporal. And they got this fella to me, and he's bleeding badly from both arms. And he always made fun afterwards because he got him out of there onto their Jeep. We called for them, and one of those strange episodes of war, there was no firing while he walked to that Jeep. We don't know whether that just happened or what, but he got on that. You probably saw some of those with the Jeep with a little stretcher on top.
Yeah.
He got on there, and he was away 6 weeks, but then he was back with us. They had a fire in the camp. Something happened. They had a 45-gallon barrel set up, and that was feeding the gas onto the plate there and created some heat, and it fell. And I don't know the story, but anyway, Fazan, who I knew very well, he and I would kind of compete with each other. Sleeping bag caught on fire, and he ran. Well, you couldn't run in a sleeping bag. He must have been jumping, but he was quite badly burned, and he was evacuated to Tokyo. And I was on guard duty on the general's house over there, then on temporary 1-month duty in Japan. And I went to see him at the hospital, and they just had him on wooden slats there. And I could light a cigarette and put it in his mouth so that he could have a puff at it. And that was the best I could do. And I knew he was badly burned. Anyway, when I left there, the nurse there was a captain. And she says to me, when I was going by then on the way out, she says, "Look, he's not going to make it." She said, "We've done all we can." She said, "You'll have to carry on from here." And that was a little bit hard to do because I went back and he was asleep and I didn't want to wake him. So I just had a prayer there with him the best I could. And yet in the morning when I checked, he had made it. He lived through the night, and he recovered. And later years he came to see me in Calgary. He was from British Columbia, Okanagan Valley. Yeah. The country had been good to me, and I felt I should go. And I felt that when the North invaded South Korea, you couldn't let it happen. You had to stop it, because had they been successful, goodness knows where they would have gone. I didn't anticipate living to 90 when we were growing up as children, but the medical care we get today is very good. But even my doctor, when I said that to him, I said, "Well, no," he said, "you were born with good genes," he said. So I realize I'm very fortunate, yes, because my long-term memory is pretty good, I think, is reasonable. And short-term, I notice little changes now there, but by and large, I think I'm still a useful member of society.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Yes.